Hey guys, welcome to Grace's Place. Thanks for stopping by. Today, we're going to make pie dough. You may be wondering, why pie dough? Pie is more than just Thanksgiving. Throughout every culture, there's pie. And there's a reason why. Pies are great for using leftovers and stretching food. You got some eggs, you got a quiche. You got some chicken stew, you got chicken pot pie. You got some beef stew, you got some steak and ale pie. You can really do anything with pie dough. And pie dough is also the base recipe for when you're making puff pastry, which will be our next video. So make sure to subscribe if you want to learn more about puff pastry. If you plan on making a pie with a bottom and a top, make sure you double this recipe. Okay, so pie dough has 4 simple ingredients: flour, butter, salt, and a liquid. I say a liquid because today I'm using water. I'm making a very simple, plain, basic pie dough recipe, but normally I like to use ice cold milk to add a little extra fat, or say I'm making an apple pie, maybe I'll use apple juice. Say I'm making chicken pot pie, maybe I'll make chicken stock, my liquid instead, just to add more flavor. Liquid is always an opportunity in a recipe to add flavor, so always think about that when you read a recipe. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a pinch of salt to my flour. Make sure it's a nice big Italian pinch, not a little cutesy pinch. Okay, I'm just going to mix that up really quick. Next thing I'm going to do is take my butter. You have to make sure your butter is nice and cold because we don't want it to melt into the flour. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it into big chunks, about this size, 2 tablespoons, just so it's easier to work with, so I'm not melting it too much. So I have my chunks of butter in my bowl with my flour. Now, this is something you want to kind of do fast. They make like cutters for this, but I think it's a lot easier and it comes out a lot better to do it with your hands, and you don't have to clean that weird butter cutter thing, if you know what I'm talking about. So I'm just gonna take this giant chunk of butter and start pinching it into my flour. This is called cutting. So I'm cutting the butter, and this is going to be hard for a little bit. Maybe you do want to use the cutter if you have like arthritis or something. But, you know, just pinching it in. You're kind of like creating flakes. I'm doing this motion. So what this cutting is doing is it's pushing the flour into the butter. If we just cut the butter chunks up and tossed it in, they wouldn't have the flour grains inside the butter pieces. So that's why you got to pinch it into the flour. All right, it's pretty good. We're kind of making these broken little flakes. And the chunks we're leaving are pretty big. Side note, if you ever made biscuits before, this is the same technique. So for a biscuit, you would leave it about this big. And for pie dough, we're looking for chunks about the size of like a hazelnut. All right. So I'm pretty good tossing that around. Next, I'm going to add my ice cold liquid. In this case, it's water. I'm not going to add all of it at once because I might not need all of it. You also have to take into account the ice melting inside your liquid while you're making it. So I look a little dry, I could use a little bit more. And I'm really just gonna mix this until it comes together into like a shaggy mess. It's really important that you don't overmix your pie dough. So you're just looking to get all that flour nice and wet. So this way it comes together. You might have a couple little pieces of flour left in your bowl, but don't worry too much about it. Nice. This might actually be too wet. See? And if it's too wet, it's okay. Maybe just add a little more flour and it'll be fine. Always have some flour handy. Perfect. Alright. This recipe is going to do one pie dough. When you're done, you're just going to flatten it into a disc. If you're going to use this right away, you can put it in the fridge, let it rest for 20 minutes, take it out, and I'll show you how to roll it out into a pie tin. So, to roll out your pie dough, flour your table, and put your pie dough on top. At this point, if your pie dough is a little wet, it's okay. You got a little flour. You don't want it too wet, but a little wet is okay. If it's too dry, you're gonna run into more problems. But in this case, flour is your friend, so this way you're not gonna stick to your table. You wanna roll out your pie dough a little bit wider than your pie dish. So always do even pressure. And turn your dough. Don't turn yourself, turn your dough. Okay, you're gonna see the pats of butter in here. That's good. These pats of butter, when they go into the oven, they're gonna melt and they're gonna produce steam. And that's what's gonna give our pie dough our nice crispy flakiness. So if you make your butter too small, you're not going to get that. So I'm just going to turn my dough again. With too much flour, just brush it off. It's important to turn your dough because that's why it won't stick to the table, but also if you're constantly going like this, which you know everyone does, you're not putting even pressure. When you go on an angle, you're going to put more pressure on this hand than you would on this hand. So you want to make sure you're going back and forth. Even rock as you go, so this way you don't hurt your back and you get more push behind each roll. So that's pretty good. I'm going to take my pie tin and I'm gonna, okay, that's big enough, that's good. So some people, they'll roll it onto the rolling pin. When it comes to the bottom part of a pie crust, I just like to fold it. I also want to make sure that I don't have any excess flour on here, so that won't taste very good in my pie. So I'm just going to fold mine into quarters very lightly, brush off the excess. I'm going to take my pie tin. Don't forget this side, right? So then the corner of that, I'm going to place in the middle. Then I'm just going to unfold my pie dough. You might need to readjust a little bit. That's okay. Try to make sure the dough is hanging over all the edges. Okay, now for the most important part, you're going to take your finger. You're going to make this shape with it. Okay? You're going to go around and push your dough into the corners. It's going to get rid of that air behind there. Alright. So if you're blind baking this, baking it with nothing in it, you want to take a fork and poke holes in the bottom and in the sides. This is called docking. What docking does is it releases the steam from behind the pie dough. So this way, when you're blind baking it, you don't get a wavy bottom, you get a nice flat bottom. So it's really important to remember to dock when you're blind baking. The last part, if you're not adding a lid to this, if you are adding a lid to this, you would just do this after you put the lid on. You're going to take your bench knife or a butter knife. I'm going to grab a butter knife because I realize that's probably what most of you guys have at home. I have all my dough over my corners. I'm just going to take a butter knife and on an angle, I'm going to cut down to cut off the dough. Now I have these pretty little handles on mine. I'm just going to make them part of the dough. They're going to be nice and crispy to eat later. Alright, so by cutting down, it's sealing the pie dough to the pie tin. And of course, before this, you could do, you know, the crimping around with a fork or whatever. But I don't have a very big ledge here, so that's why I'm not doing that. Alright. And these scraps could always be saved to cut out some decorations and put them along the edges of your pie tin. But that's how you make a pie. So now you can make this a quiche, you could make it chicken pot pie, whatever you want to do, apple pie. Enjoy your pie.